Welcome back, everyone, to the Smartbuild implementation series. We are in part 25, and this is going to be a two-part video. First, we'll be focusing on span tables, the first half, and then the second half, a new feature that we've added more recently, the loading tables. So we have a job here in front of us, and if I zoom in and look a little bit closer, you'll see that by toggling the shell off, we see that there are some items that have been automatically updated by Smartbuild in product size. So when it comes to Smartbuild, we're not doing engineering. Uh, we are doing automatically sizing products based off of what you have put into the system during your setup. So if we look at something like a door header or a truss carrier, or maybe a post or a column, girts, purlins, a lot of the parts and pieces in the system, you can have Smartbuild automatically size that member for you if you set up the tables to do that. And that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. So if we look above these door openings here, you can see there looks like to be an engineered wood product above the opening. And that's just because it's following a loading table that I've set up. And another factor is going to be the second part of this, which is the loading tables and span tables working together. So let's dive right in. You'll find most of these setup parts in the settings. So we go to settings, and we're going to start out in span tables. Now in this sample database I have here, I have some span tables, and you can see different examples of the product that it is, like where it's being used in the job, and also just a text string of loading. So these loading numbers don't really mean anything to us. They're just to help you identify which table that's part of. So if we come into this area, it's going to be blank to begin with. We click Add Table. And at this point, it asks us, what kind of table do we want to set up? And if we say yes, we want to do a post. And this is it an eve post? And if you want to have two separate tables for eve and gable posts, you could do that. I'll just leave this one. This is going to be our eve post. And you can type in anything in there. It can be a number, it can be a word, something like standard loading. Simple. We'll go with that, and we click Save. At that point, we get a new table to start with, and we just start adding our lines. At what wall height do we want to start with? And this could be, the first break point that you upsize your post. So maybe up to 10-foot tall buildings, you use a certain size column up to a certain width. And let's just I'll start with the 10-foot wide, and let's say our post spacing is 8-foot standard. That's good for up to a 40-foot wide building. And then we choose our product. So if we choose our product right now, these are just the actual framing parts. We do have assemblies coming where you're going to be able to choose the assembly too. So this video here, we're in the process of that. So right now it is just going through and showing you the framing parts that you can choose from. So we have this product line, a treated 6x6, and it's good for up to that width. We click Add, and you can see how we have this new entry created. Now the order of these entries are really crucial. So if I add another line item and I say 10-foot wall height up to 8-foot post spacing, and we're going to do up to 60-foot wide, maybe we use an 8x8. And again, you'd find your 8x8 product if you have one, or again, whatever that is. These would be your products, so you're needing to plug in your products. I'm just going to pick something here, and I hit OK. So now I have these two lines set up. And again, do I need to go further? And the question is, do I ever do a building wider than 60 feet? If the answer is yes, I need to add another line, for this wall height and this post spacing up to maybe 80 feet or 100 feet in the next breakpoint. So if we look at some of these samples, without spending more time on that setup, if I look at like one of the examples I've set up, you can see how, again, the order is very crucial. And if I look at like this sample one, it starts out 12-foot wall height, 8-foot post spacing, up to 80-foot wide, use this nail lamp 3-ply. And then all the way up to 178 feet, then I break up to the 3-ply 2x8. Now, again, with these orders being crucial, I stuck with a certain wall height, and I didn't change up to my max post spacing. So the reason you may do wider post spacing if there's a open bay or something, and you need to span further, and then up to that widest building depth that I could use that column with. And then I jump to my next largest wall height, or the next break point. So again, going 12, 14, just all the standard heights, starting out at 8-foot posts, going to my widest post spacing, starting out at my first break point on building width. And this says building depth. That means the size of the truss or the rafter span. So if you're doing a rafter building, it would be double this. So if you're doing a 40-foot wide building that has like 20-foot rafters, you have to do the math here. This is the width of the building that you enter in the Smartbuild, and then the product. So again, that's a really quick overview of span tables. And as you get into other products like rafters, it's a little more straightforward. There's just two fields to fill out. So we have a rafter length, which is the actual span of that rafter, and then the skew. So if we're doing a product like a 2x4, 2x6 rafters, or an I-beam metal rafter, again, you start out with your first span, your smallest material, and you keep increasing up to that widest span that you need. And again, there may be cases where if you wanted to use multiple products in different cases, you can, again, the order is crucial. If it sees a rafter length that works, that's the product it uses. If it exceeds this span, it moves to the next line. Does that one work? And it just runs a check each time that it's looking for that. So rafters are like that. You can have eave posts, you can have gable posts, and you can have jamb posts, eave and gable. So if you look at these table choices that we have, you click the drop down, you can see all the different products, and we're going to be adding some more down the road. We eventually want to do joist materials, loft framing, things like that. But right now we're just doing the primary shell framing. So again, that's loading table or the span tables. We're going to get into loading tables next and how they tie together. So with this question of, okay, I'm using span tables, but how did I even get this loading question here, which kind of comes into the span table part of it too. So I have this text here that says loading. So if we go into our settings, and again, you can set up all these tables up, but you still have to make it work in the job. And the way that this ties together in the job, there's several parts and pieces that work together. So if we look at our framing rules, one part is framing rules. When we go in to edit our framing rules, there's a few tabs here that we can work with, and the tab that we're going to be looking for is our job tab. So when you go into our job tab, these are the questions that you answer when you're entering the customer's info. We have to have a field that is exactly like this. It has to say loading. And to create this field, if you don't have it, we can help you, or you can simply click add. It can be a text or a list. So I'm going to do a list here, and I just type in the word loading. And at that point, I have my loading prompt. And if you see how I set this one up, it's basically the word loading, and then I can put a tooltip in if I want. But I have my choices, all the different loadings I'm going to have, and I separate them with the line break like this. So it has an example here. So I have all my choices. Then when you save this and you look at the drop down, you can see how it's going to work in the job. So that's the first part of this. That's how to activate span tables, is by using these loading drop down, creating this loading entry. So if I go back into the job, again, that's what it looks like. I've got my drop down here. That's what tells Smartbuild which span table to use. Now there's another part of this. It ties into trusses. So if you need to, you can watch our truss video, but the trusses also use that loading. So when I'm looking for a truss for that job, it tries to figure out, okay, what's the loading, and do I have a truss of that loading that matches? So when I look at my job review and I go to trusses and I look at one of these that it found a match in, loading is one of the variables that it has to match. So again, that's all important. And you can watch the truss video if you need to go back and see more about setting up trusses. But again, for span tables, we have to add the text loading. We have to give it choices. We have to add trusses in our catalog that match this. And then in the job, when we select that, that should match up the correct product. One other thing I want to mention on these loading tables and span tables is, in order for the span tables to actually be used in a job, we have to have auto as a choice. So what does that mean? So when you go into your framing rules, and if you pick something like a column or a gird or anything, wherever you want to use this, we have to click the little green E icon in the framing rules, and we have to make sure that auto is a choice. So if auto is not a choice on your list here of columns, wall material, whatever the product is, you can go find auto. It's kind of like none. It's maybe at the bottom there, and you want to add it to the left list. So when you click add, it moves it over, and then it makes it available here. And maybe you move that to the top of the list with the little up arrow there. So you have to make sure that auto is available for any product that you plan to set a table up for. So if you set your truss carrier, wall framing, anything. So again, that should help clear up that question. So again, that's span tables. Now we're going to go a step further, and we've had span tables for quite some time, several years in Smartbuild. A lot of people use them, and save yourself a lot of time of having to go look up, okay, what size post do I use? You just plug it in one time and then it does that. So what do loading tables do? So loading tables are a little bit further kind of enhancing upon span tables. And with loading tables, it can look at a zip code and go look up the correct chart. So if I'm a sales rep and I really don't, all I know is, hey, this job is at whatever zip code. And I put in my zip code, the customer's address, and all that I know is I know the zip code and I know that it's a agricultural project or it's residential. That's all I know. And that's all I have to know. And Smartbuild is going to plug in the correct loading for me. Again, so your admins at your company can set this up, or you can set this up to save yourself to having to go look these up each time. And you can set up as many zip codes as you want. So it's basically a zip code lookup tool that considers as many job questions that you need, up to 4, and it also looks at the loading. So this one here's already been set up. Let's dive in and see how I set this up. So first things first, I created a product or a project question called project type. And again, to do that, you click the add button. You can choose a list type, and you can put in a tooltip, and you can put in the prompt and then the list options. So if I look at how that one is set up, you can see project type. You can see the different types separated by a line break. So I do all that. Now I have this question and I can make this required in the job. That forces my sales rep to fill it out so they don't forget. So when that's required, then they can't leave it blank. So again, that's the initial step. I need some questions that I'm going to have to answer. The other question would be the zip code. That one's pretty popular. So when I look at this one, again, zip code's probably already been set up. You just enter whatever zip code you want. Now, when I do this, these 3 things, I'm just going to, on this loading table, I'm going to set it up to where it considers project type and zip code, and then it fills in the loading for me. So this one's going to be pretty basic. And if we, again, to get to this, we go to settings, we go to loading tables. And in this case, I'm just going to leave, we'll go in there. And for the loading table here, I have some examples set up, but we'll start fresh and we'll create some all the way through. So if we look at this example, I have a zip code, I have a project type, and I have a loading. So it tells it which loading to plug in, which is, if you go back to the first part of this video, we have to create those span tables to begin with so that these loadings exist. So with this one, when it's, let's say it's the same zip code, but it's a residential project, I use this loading instead. And one reason maybe if you're using like a drywall ceiling or something and you wanted to use heavier trusses, size everything a little bit bigger, whether it's agriculture or residential or maybe even commercial. Like those are the three that I set up. So I'm just going to clear this table out, say yes, and we'll start fresh. So whenever I can update my questions, and let's start there. So when you click update questions, you can enter your different job questions that you're going to be using. So I'm using zip code, I'm using project type that I just created, and these other 2, we're not using them. You can do up to 4. I'm not going to use those right now. All that it does is it adds another column here. So if I click the add button and I type in my zip code, so if I put in a zip code, and next I can click a project type. So let's say this is residential. And for this, I want it to use my 211010 loading. I click add. Just like that, anytime that someone uses this zip code and choose a residential project, it knows to use this loading. Okay, let's go further. Let's say that it's the same zip code, but it's an agricultural project. Well, I don't have to have that. I'm just going to go with the lighter loading. Leave that. So now I have this automatically. Now, let's say that it's the same zip code, but it is a commercial project. And maybe for commercial, I want to do, I do everything 5 pounds heavier. I'm just making this up. So again, that could be your setup. And you could go through and do this to all your zip codes, all your standard zip codes in your area. And you may have thousands of zip codes if you cover a large radius. But you can download this table and you can work in Excel and re-upload it if you build a few samples out. So you can re-upload it and save yourself a lot of time if you work in Excel. But again, really, really simple and straightforward. You've got your zip codes here. You've got your job questions that are other factors, and then you've got the loading that you're matching to it. Now, if you say I'm just using zip code and I don't need this one, I just set this back to none. It would remove that question. So it looks like if you do it in that way, it can break your system, so it starts all over. But I just need to delete my table. So I just delete this table and I'll start fresh. and we'll go back in here. So here's this, clear this out and you can see. So now I just have zip code and loading. I don't have the project type. And again, that's a good place to start, but just think about it as you're going through what other factors affect your loading, so that when you're in a job, your sales reps or you really don't have to think. You just plug in the type of project and the zip code, and it can go look up the correct span table for you. So if you just wrapping that up really quick, we've covered two parts here. Span tables and loading tables are a big part of Smartbuild when it comes to automatically sizing. Even though we're not doing engineering, it can be a big help, a time saver, and it can also avoid, a new salesperson quoting a project with, with a material, maybe a header, maybe a column being too small, and that can really cut into your profit. So I hope this video helps everyone, and have a great day.